Testing.
Good evening. Today is Wednesday, March 12th, 2025. We are at Connors Elementary School. We'll call the meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. We will start committee member introductions with Councilor Harriman.
Scott Harriman, City Council Representative to the School Committee.
Donna Gallant, Ward 7.
Megan Hurd, Ward 6.
Iman Osman, Ward 5.
Craig Charpentier, Ward 4.
Elizabeth Eames, Ward 3.
Janet Bowden, Ward 2.
Phoenix McLaughlin, Ward 1.
Megan Park at large.
Jake Langley, Superintendent.
Karen Paquette, Assistant Superintendent.
Thank you. We will now continue with the budget presentation for Article 2, Special Education.
So we'll put some slides up to share, and Director Crafts will walk us through some information. We have slides similar to others that we've been sharing that have, table that emphasizes or shows differences and dollar and percentage change amounts. Prior to then, we'll talk about some different highlights and bright spots from special education, including some of the good work that's happening programmatically, including the climb expansion effort. And without further ado, I will put your slideshow.
All right. Good evening. I'm Director Crafts, Special Education Director for the entire district. I have a bunch of people here that also work for my department, and I'll try to weave them in when I can throughout the presentation. So first slide is, and this is popping up. It says unmute myself on the computer. Should I just leave it? Okay. Perfect. Okay, so overview of the department, 354 staff members as of today, 1140 special education students identified, 353 504 students, 120 outplaced students. We have 23 currently at Climb and 2 students from different districts attending Climb. We also have 2 that transferred in this week that will be additions to go to probably an outplacement or somewhere in-house. They're coming in with IEPs for outplacements already. So that happens quite a bit. Celebrations. Well, so I'll start first with celebrations. I watched the principals do that the other day, and I think that we have a lot to celebrate. So Climb has saved thus far $2,603,000. Sorry, $2.6 million. We'll just stay with that. And it's a rough number anyways. So from August 24th to July 25th, that's a projection. It's hard to understand the actual number because we had to put money up front in order to start the program. So Adam and I were talking today about how much does it cost to hire the staff thus far and all of the other things that come with it. So we're looking at about 2.8 million, right, Adam, for the staff hiring itself and getting the program up and running. The 2.6 million is coming from the projections of the students not being outplaced and staying in LPS. Plus, we are figuring that we will have 1.385 million in projected revenue from main care that comes in from the state. So that is in addition to sort of kind of breaking even, getting it going. Plus, if those numbers come out accurately, we'll be making some money. Our audit is complete, so we have to do a special education audit regularly. We are now on phase 1 or level 1. We are good for 6 years. My assistant director, Anna Matthew, who's not here tonight, headed that up, but our assistant principals of special education also did a lot of work in that. And a lot of them are here. I don't know if you want to stand up if you're an assistant principal for special ed. A lot of work. So for 2 years straight. So they did a great job with that. So we're good for 6 years in that front. So that's a good thing. We went from 50 kids being waitlisted last year when I stood up here saying that I wanted to start something new, which was a huge number in my opinion, like trying to figure that out, to just a handful. Right now, you'll see later on in the slide what it was as of today. I think it's around like 9 students needing an outplacement. And then some kids that are moving in that we need to figure out what we're going to do because their IEPs already state that. We also have a data analysis report that Michelle Winslow, if you want to stand up, Special Education Assistant Director, she made that her goal this year to look at data for the special education department and see what our strengths and weaknesses are. It is attached here, but it's not quite finalized. I don't know if you want to speak about it at all, Michelle, and say anything. But we're just trying to figure out how we can get better and identifying where the needs are. So
Yeah, so we just looked at our current Power School data as well as our data within our special ed system. We looked at enrollment trends as well as things that might be posing challenges for our special education students, to include discipline data as well as attendance data. And we also took a look at our dually identified students as well as our McKinney-Vento students.
once that's finalized, we can go over it further if you'd like to. It's just right now, we just feel like we're still like going through trends and talking to the assistant principals about it. So we're not quite there yet, but it will be something good to share in the future. Did you have a question, Jake?
I didn't know if you wanted me to click on the link or if you just wanted to do a quick.
It's 50 pages long, so yeah, I'll save everyone some time. But you can click on it if you want, if the PowerPoint is shared with you when you get home or whatnot. But we can go over it all further once it's more developed and refined. Our programs are functioning well as of now. I know that some of the assistant principals and principals might disagree because at times it seems like it's a hot mess. But things ebb and flow quite a bit. However, we do have a consultant that comes in once a month or once every other month. And he has consistently told me for about the last year that we are doing significantly better and we're healthy in terms of programming. Of course, there's always hiccups, there's staff issues, not having enough staff, but overall doing well, I would say. There are staff shortages. I think the principals talked about that the other night in pockets, which is hard. We also have a lot of kids coming in for CDS, and we're going to have to hold some spots for them. And I'll talk about that later on in this presentation. Inclusive education is happening throughout the district, in Climb included as well. I don't know if you want to go to the next slide, Jake, but inclusive education would be including special education kids into the mainstream setting as much as possible. So I wanted to start out by recognizing the Geiger team for co-teaching. I know Cindy brought it up, Principal Gish, the other night about how grades 4, 5, and 6 are co-teaching. I was fortunate enough to be able to watch 2 sessions happen. I also watched some sessions happen a couple years ago. And I have been so impressed with everything I've seen there. They take it very seriously. It's a pretty cool thing to see kids engaged that are special education kids receiving regular ed instruction in the mainstream, and you can't even tell who's who. Both teachers and the ones that I've observed, you can't tell who the regular teacher is versus the special ed teacher. The instructional coaches are part of this. The admin are part of it. Everybody believes in it. And you see the picture on the left shows the entire team. They're talking about what they were going to see when we walked into the classroom. Those are the 2 teachers that I took a picture of on the right. They were teaching together, sharing their responsibilities. The kids were all engaged. It was awesome. And then afterwards, we all went back and sat and processed it. And I probably shared too much. I wasn't used to the co-teaching model, but I was so excited because they did such a great job. So I want to recognize them tonight. You can stand up. So we have letters for you. So Michelle, if you want to pass them out, but that's Christiana, the assistant principal of special education. Cindy Gish is here. Instructional coach Chris Bossie's here. I don't know, is anybody else here from Geiger? Nope, they all have letters. So if you want to pass them out to the actual teachers themselves. So thank you. I was incredibly impressed. So great job. Yes. All right, transitions at the high school. Last year I stood up here and said that we were going to start promoting what could secondary ed look like? How can we do more for our high school kids? That's where I came from. I'm passionate about it. I brought on a transitions coordinator this year. Her name's Michelle Hill. I don't know if you want to come up. And Sarah is also here. Gentle, she's an AP that oversees. Michelle Hill, here's your letter. But they've done a great job. You see here, she has really tried to get the kids into the community, has got them into, when they're 17 and a half, they are referred to the Office of Aging and Disabilities. They're eligible to receive services after high school. We have a ton of kids that, since the law changed for special education, it went up to the age of 22, not 20. And we have a lot of students that are young adults moving into the community, needing more programming than we have to offer. It's hard to get into an outplacement when you have very significant needs. Michelle has taken on some of them where we can and tutoring, getting them out into the community. She starts the process for our own kids in-house as early as 9th grade and is just trying to do the best she can every day. You can see the different businesses that she has collaborated with. And yeah. I don't know if you want to offer anything, say anything, or if you have any questions for her or anything, but we're just trying to make their experience in high school as best as can be and promote a better life after high school. Something that I thought was missing prior to stepping in this position.
I just wanted to do one celebration today. We had a student that was hired at Blackie's today with the work that we started at the beginning of the school year.
Fine. So Katie and April, if you want to come up, they're going to take over this portion of the presentation, but I consider it a celebration, but I also wanted them to give you an update of how the programming is going thus far and how it's developed and maybe some possibilities for the future.
Hi, my name's Katie Colasante. I'm one of the directors of Climb.
I am April Karen. I'm the other director of Climb.
So just first of all, we're super grateful that we were able to start this program, and we're really proud of our team and what we've accomplished so far this school year. So a little bit about our team. Right now, we have 23 students and 24 BHPs. We have 5 teachers, so 5 classrooms that those students and those BHPs are broken up into. We have 1 billing specialist who helps us handle all of that main care billing piece, all of the paperwork and all of the training. And then we have 1 front office staff. She handles our power school, absences, all of the pieces of kind of running a mini school within a school. And then we have our related service team. So we have a speech and language therapist, a speech and language therapy assistant, an occupational therapist, physical therapist, behavior analyst, and then a school clinician that make up our team. We broke down a little bit kind of the who, what, when, where, and why of Climb. I think that what we've been trying to do is share with our community what Climb is. There's been a lot of kind of questions around that. So who are we serving? We're serving students with highly complex neurodevelopmental disabilities, mainly in the autism spectrum disorder category, students who require substantial support to communicate and to engage in their environment, whether that be a learning environment or a community environment. What is our focus? We are trying to work collaboratively as a team with the families to be able to target specific skills that the families would like to focus on and the specific skills that would help those students be able to access less restrictive environments in our public school. We have a 205-day school year, so we follow the LPS calendar, and then we also have an additional 30 days of full day, 5-day-a-week instruction, which sets us apart a little bit in terms of comparable outplacement summer programs, as well as the extended school year services that are offered within Lewiston Public Schools right now. We are loving being located in McMahon Elementary School, being able to access all of the environments within the school when our students are ready, and engaging with the team over there has truly been a pleasure. And they've been super welcoming. So thank you, Charlotte. And why are we doing this? We really feel that our community, our students and our families have the right to have ABA programming within a public school setting so that our kiddos don't need to be on transportation for long periods of time every day to school and from school, when we know that we can provide that level of programming here at home right in Lewiston.
So just back to the first slide real quick. We can say that all students in CLIMB are accessing educational environments in the general education. I feel you guys can't. Can you hear me though? Okay. So all of our students are accessing spaces in McMahon School. So they all are going to the gym for their UA. Most of them are accessing the school library. And so that's just a huge success for our students to be able to move out into that larger setting and to be successful. Our teachers hold parent meetings monthly in addition to the IEP meetings. So that's just a space for the teachers to connect with their families, to find out what the families need at home, and to have some carryover between home and school. We want to continue to strengthen that collaboration with families moving forward, especially involving our school clinician. There have been times where families, their parents have come in and worked directly with service providers in order to see what we're doing with the students, to have that generalization from school to home. We also are working with agencies in our community to trial adaptive equipment, or to have adaptive equipment for our students, including Pine Tree Society, Kennebec Pharmacy, Annual Health affiliates, and AbleNet for communication devices for our students. And we also take a multidisciplinary approach for our program. So within our 5 classrooms, each teacher has an opportunity to meet for 1 hour a week with our multidisciplinary team, so our speech and language, OT, PT, clinical staff, and to just talk about the students, talk about what the staff might need in their classrooms. And then they take what we speak about in those multidisciplinary team meetings and bring it back to their classrooms to then speak about that with their BHP.
So just some photos of things that have been going on at CLIMB. We're accessing the famous McMahon Mountain, I think that's called, where the kids go sledding. So that's been pretty exciting. It's kind of out of our little fenced-in courtyard play area. So just another example of somewhere that our kiddos are accessing that is commensurate with their peers who are over at McMahon. Our students are accessing multilingual services at McMahon. Some of our students have those push into our CLIMB classrooms, and we have groups of students who are transitioning out to the multilingual classroom that all of their typically developing peers are accessing for multilingual instruction, which has been super exciting. We engage in a survey with our staff to see how's it going. This is a brand new thing for Lewiston Public Schools to have. And overall, our staff survey was really positive. They're feeling supported, they're feeling ready and wanting to grow even more, which was very exciting for April and I. Our families at those parent meetings and at the IEP meetings are sharing that they're seeing increases in skills. And skills maybe not looking like ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, but when families are sharing with us that their child has never responded to their name before and they're starting to respond to their name before at home, or they're starting to engage with their siblings instead of sitting on their iPad on the couch. Those are some really, really big increases in skills that are huge celebrations, and it's really great to see that generalization already happening there. And then I don't know, Charlotte, if you want to chat about the unified arts teachers, but they have also been pushing into our wing and providing instruction, and we're visiting some of those environments as well.
I think I just want to celebrate, I celebrated this on Monday, but and going off what Katie was saying, the growth that students have made. Now, when I see students in the hallway, they are initiating a smile and a wave to people on the McMahon side, including myself. They'll stop in our offices on the way, which is huge growth just from the beginning of the year where there was very little eye contact, very little communication. So it's really cool to see. And I do want to shout out the Unified Arts teacher, Mr. Sherry, and Coach Fox, who's the phys ed teacher. And then we have our librarians and our STEM teacher, Miss Houghton. They've been going to climb, but also having kids come to their spaces. So it's really awesome to see. And like Katie was saying about our ML teachers do the same thing. So 3 out of our 4 ML teachers are servicing students in climb. So we're really starting to build a really inclusive community.
Do you have any questions?
Member Galant?
Yes, thank you. How many students have returned back to Lewiston that are in your climb program that were outplaced for services?
Sure. Yeah, we have 6 students who have returned from outplacements.
Okay.
So we've been able to work collaboratively with those agencies to make transition plans and bring them back to the school buildings, reducing their transportation time, but also kind of keeping the same programming for them and altering it to fit kind of our setting versus the private setting.
Okay. And one more question. After, I would say, is this kindergarten through 6th grade?
So right now we have students who are kindergarten through 3rd grade.
Okay.
Within McMahon, we could go up to 6th grade.
Okay. So what's the process after either 3rd grade or 6th grade? Where do these students go after that time frame?
So right now we have, you'll see in later slides, the incoming kindergartners. So we do have to try to keep in mind that we might have some incoming kindergartners coming our way. So I think that the continuity of programming would be K4 next year, and then K5, and then K6.
I can answer.
Yeah. Okay.
She's,
So
Director Crafts will touch on some of these
Yeah,
expansion
that's
points as
okay.
she goes through her
Sorry.
presentation for sure.
Well, and to say to that, and I think I've said it, I don't know if I said it to you all or not. Actually, I said it to the Sun Journal, but I had multiple interviews with them. But I was quoted just in our hallway talk. But we did have a nice interview. We sat down and talked about the reasons why it's kind of back down K-3, and also I want to point out in that interview that parents were interviewed and spoke up and said how much their kids had progressed. And I wish that that would have been there, but it was awesome to hear. And it kind of brought a tear to my eye, and it didn't make it in the paper, and I understand, but I just wanted you all to have that information. So we lived and learned this year. Last year when I presented it, I said I was going to do K-6 this year with the hopes to do pre-K to 12 next year. But we realized that it's hard to take a kid or kids that have been in a program. Let's say you're trying to take a 4th or 5th grader from a Margaret Murphy or a Woodford's that has always been there. And we had, because that's all that they know. There's been some pushback here and there from schools, some schools, not others. We automatically took in 17 kids from CDS last year that needed this level of programming. So they came in, so we have a lot of littles and then also some 1st, 2nd, and 3rd graders. Next year, we have 14 kids coming in potentially for climb. So we only have so much space. So it makes sense to just do K-3 and then go through as the years progress, hoping that they will end up in the mainstream or at least in RISE or FLS because their LRE, their least restrictive environment, is in the public school setting. So we're trying to expand. With McMahon, they've already started, Charlotte talked about this the other night, they've already started a classroom for RISE because some kids are doing great and they don't need 2-to-1s or 1-to-1s, and they can be in the mainstream in an ABA program such as RISE, and hopefully someday we can get them into regular ed, not regular ed, but receiving services within the regular ed, co-taught, whatever it may be. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit more. Yes.
But just, I want to touch on this because I know the school committee's asked this question numerous times, but when we say that 6 students have come back to Lewiston Public Schools because of the climb program, I just want to harness a number for a minute that when she said 17 students, I think she said 17 were incoming, those are students that we would have immediately been responsible to outplace. And so I think all told, I think right now you have what, 23 current students with one that's transitioned, and she'll touch on that more, but just when she said 6, I was like, wait a minute, don't think it's just 6. And other programs are also taking students back. So there's more context to it. But.
Yeah, there's a handout in your green folder that shows the breakdown, and also I think it's attached later on the slide, and we can go over all of the logistics of that. So the goals for next year with Climb would be to, yes,
Megan, member Hurd.
Thank you. So just before you go to that, I just want to say, can you go back one slide just real quick? So I happen to be at McMahon quite often. And I just have to say that every time I'm there, cute little kids in a wagon just brings a smile to your face.
Yes.
And so, and I can see it with like other staff and the kids, like it's just like an uplifting type of mood, I guess. You know what I mean? It's like a mood booster. And so I think it's really great. And
I want to stay there all the time. It's like,
yeah, so I think it's great. And I think the kids really, the gen ed kids really do enjoy it, and it's uplifting to them. So I'm glad that it's back, and I hope we can expand within the McMahon building.
So the wagons came at the beginning of the year because we didn't have bathrooms. So they were wagoning the kids to the bathrooms, and it's kind of stuck, but it's like become this thing at McMahon is the wagons. So, yes. I think I was on the next slide. Yeah, that's right. So for next year, the goals would be we need to add a classroom there for kindergarten because we have getting my numbers confused, 14 kids that we're looking at potential sliding them into Climb. So that would have been an outplacement cost at probably $150,000 total per kid, because these are kids that need to be transported. We have to pay their Section 28 responsibilities to the state, and also the tuition costs. So we'll go over it later on, but we took 17 last year and put them into Climb. So that was a huge savings. We added lines into the budget. So this past year, I tried to spend as much money as I had from Easter funds and other lines prior to July 1 in order to fund supplies and all that in the classrooms. After that, we've been using funds out of the special education line. So I added lines in for that so that they can get their materials like the other programs do year to year. We also need an additional bathroom stall added. And we would like to strengthen programming at McMahon. Charlotte talked about the other night adding a RISE classroom, which is great because if a kid's ready to move out of Climb and into a least restrictive environment, they won't have to go to Geiger or Connors. They can just stay in that school where they're comfortable. Yes.
So this might be a Bill question, which we'll probably talk about this at facilities, but because I'm on facilities, I know the makeup of the whole bathroom situation that's gone over there. Is there even a space to put another stall in there? Like, what's our plan? Sorry, I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but I feel like we're going to have to budget for this.
We've talked
right?
about it a little bit.
So as the paint was drying, they said, "Can we get another bath?" There is we could do something in the changing room that's there. Put another toilet in that. But as far as solid space, we'd be eating up classroom space. So it's going to be something that we're going to have to fight and figure out as we move forward with it. And putting in a bathroom is a costly thing because of plumbing. So.
I also have funds, local entitlement funds that can be used towards that. So, I mean, not a ton, but we do receive some funds. Good, next. The first set of bathrooms and the fixes after. So our CDS numbers for next year, I know CDS is like a hot topic issue. I did not volunteer, or we did not volunteer to be part of Pilot 2 for next year. We have had conversations with the state about potentially taking one class on. They're coming in using their space, but didn't feel like we wanted to get Climb up and running, or I did. I think they share the same sentiments, and get that going so we were fully prepared before signing up for the cohort. We have 96 active CDS students with IEPs starting kindergarten next year, which is higher than this last year at this time. We had 80, so that's a big jump. 22 students currently in Child Find, so they're currently being evaluated for an IEP. They might not all get an IEP, but potentially an additional 22. 42 students are being observed within that number of 96 for something more. So 15 we've identified potential Climb students, and out of that, the rest would be either a day treatment level program, self-contained, RISE, or FLS. So that's what something more means. So we have individuals that go out and observe them and make those determinations prior to starting kindergarten. Yes.
So for your incomings, I don't know if we've talked about this or we've talked about this as a committee before, but sometimes incoming kiddos from CDS may say that they qualify for certain services, but then when you get here and you evaluate and you do all those things, you're like, okay, maybe actually it's this, this, and this. So the 96 active, that's like a true number. That's what they're coming in with and they're telling you, but that could potentially change.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of kids that are identified as speech-only kids that do not stay on the caseload for that long. It's different, and sometimes they're not diagnosed properly, so there's always shifts. It's a lot. It's a lot. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but no. It's going to be a project pretty soon.
I just want to touch on a couple things. One, I think everyone in the committee knows what CDS is, but someone watching at home may not realize that CDS stands for Child Development Services. And those are students who are very young, but coming into school age that have special needs that have been identified. And they vary from the most highest level of need all the way to students that might require one layer of service that, as mentioned, could shift over time. But some kids come in needing having unidentified services that they then require as we discover about them. So this goes back to the conversation of, and not all people who do evaluations, but some places who did evaluations or do evaluations that might also then provide the services seem to find more needs that they can bill for than maybe others who wouldn't be billing. So this is part of that effort to make sure we're doing right by the kids, but also not over identifying kids who may not have needs that another entity might have an interest in so they can get reimbursements and things of that nature.
Member Gallant?
Wouldn't there be a conflict of interest if someone is evaluating and also providing the services? There's no conflict of interest of that connection?
I think there are lots of good organizations that don't have they don't use it as a conflict of interest type scenario. They don't take advantage of it, I guess I would say. But there have been some entities that we think absolutely want to make sure kids have as many services as possible because they're all reimbursable and billable at specific rates. And this is not just a Lewiston thing. This is a statewide thing. The Department of Education talks about it a great deal, trying to find mechanisms to have reliable metrics to identify kids that go across the spectrum. And I, Michelle, are you looking to touch on maybe some of the kids that are harder to get back from certain places, or I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I
talk about
wanted to come up
identifiers.
and touch on that the number of students that we're observing this year is a much higher rate than we usually observe. I would say probably it's doubled. And I also wanted to share that the concern also is that there is very limited availability of childcare and early intervention within our community. So this number is a little bit frightening to begin with, but also frightening because we know that this number does not capture the need that is coming to us next year. So this is a low estimate of the kids that we are going to have to try to figure out how to program for. And then we will also have kids come in that have not received early intervention, that will not have an IEP, that we will need to refer, evaluate, and find programming for. So I told Karen as well as Kirsten, this is probably my biggest worry moving into next year. The numbers are pretty high.
Member Bowden?
Luckily,
We have Climb and other strong programs, hopefully.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, there are spots that we're leaving open within district in order to make that happen.
I just had a question about, so you didn't sign up for a cohort this year with CDS,
Mhm,
and it's still an optional thing.
mhm.
Is it going to not be an optional thing next year?
I don't believe so.
You don't think so? So if it is an optional thing, will we kind of pass it by again next year for space and other reasons?
So right now, there are a projection of 3 rounds of optional. And the third round still has some question marks on it as to whether or not it'll be forced or optional. So it either will be year 3 or year 4 that, according to current state language, which is having some pushback, it'll be in the hands of public schools.
And we will have some space issues and some resource issues when that happens. Yep.
I did speak to the special education director in Auburn right before I got here, and they're taking on cohort 2 next year. So, and we're in collaboration a lot. We're working together. She has sent some kids to Climb. So we are going to try to help each other out in that sense if we do have to take CDS on. So we try to work together as much as possible. So our increases this year that were unavoidable are our speech expenses are 57% up 57% from 24-25. At the bottom, you'll see that there's an attachment. It's in your folder. It just breaks it down by numbers like speech provider 1, 2, 3, 4. We have a lot of contracted speech service providers. The needs for speech are higher and higher every year, and there are less speech pathologists or speech providers out there. So we are paying more and more and more because we have to contract because there's just nobody to hire. So that was an unavoided cost. I used local entitlement for that. Our psychological evaluations have gone way up. Last year, most of the psych providers that we contract with went up in prices, and we have also had a lot of students referred for special education services due to whether it's students that have moved in, immigrant refugees. We've had, a lot of different group homes come up in the area. It's just, it costs special education more money because we try to under child find what we need to do for the student. We also, I wanted to give an update on our programming. I touched on it at the beginning, but last year we had 190 students in special programs. We're now up to 226. So we have 203 students that are currently enrolled in-house in either self-contained day treatment. So that is primarily emotional disabilities, or OHI, kids that are struggling with maintaining in the regular ed setting and need something more, behavior plans, they have clinicians tied to them, or RISE FLS or separate RISE FLS. We're trying to do that as much as possible in-house rather than paying the extra cost to outplace them. So that keeps growing. So that is saving money because that's less kids that we're sending out. We have 23 kids at Climb, and I have taken 2 students from Auburn that have come in, and we have an agreement and with tuition and all that. So that's going well. We also have our special purpose private schools. Last year I had 133. We're currently down to 120. As I mentioned at the beginning, there's 2 more that moved in this week that are already in an outplacement. So that's 13 less than last year. I mean, we did start climb, and that is 23 students that are not in outplacement, but I think every year we're getting more and more students enrolling in the district. So it's hard to get that down as much as possible, but we're working on it. Our wait list, I mentioned earlier, has gone down quite a bit. Again, last year it was around 50. Now we have 9 students that are waiting for a special purpose private school placement. And we have 6 that were discharged from a special purpose private school placement that are just in limbo that we need to. Unfortunately, they don't have to follow MUSER, which is the special ed laws, and they are able to discharge children where we are not. So it ends up being the SAU's responsibility to find something else. We have 2 students on the radar for a more restricted environment within district and multiple young adults waiting for programming who transferred in this year into homes. So those are the kids that fall in from like the 18 to 22-year-old bracket that are either waiting for an outplacement, such as like a Margaret Murphy or whatnot. We have Michelle working with them, Michelle Hill from the high school, trying to figure out, some post-secondary stuff, but it's been a tricky world to navigate. Yes.
I just want to go back for a second. So we have 6 students that were discharged from special purpose private schools for behavior reasons
Or attendance.
and they're allowed to do that. And we're not.
I'll let Jake comment on that one, what he wants to share.
Wait, that doesn't make any sense. Why are they allowed to discharge students?
It lands in statute, but I think it's something that is being challenged more and more. And so right now there's essentially an allowability. And I think we're gonna push back on some of these situations and say that MUSER actually applies to all kids, regardless of what you are as an entity. And so more to come on that, but yeah, very frustrating scenario of the team working very, very hard to find the right placement for a student, going through the intake and onboarding process, have the kids start there, have it be going well in many cases, and then hear that they're being discharged. And they are required services immediately. So then the team has to scramble with tutoring, specially designed instruction, who's going to do it, where can it happen, and all of those components. It's a very complicated thing to have to do.
So they're not responsible then to find a new service for the student? We are?
I would say that it's being debated, but currently
What does it?
there are special purpose private schools discharging kids on their own discretion.
That's terrible.
But they live in Lewiston and they are Lewiston Public Schools students.
Next. More to come on that. Might want to read the newspaper. Our outplacement increases, again, you'll just see through the years, 23, 24, 25. I talked about this last year a lot, how the state, the DOE dictates the special purpose private school tuition rates. A couple of years ago, the big jump from 5.6 to 7.2 was that after COVID, they told the special purpose private schools that they could no longer discharge for attendance. Well, that's not true because they do that, but it was in hopes that they would keep the kids longer, and some of them actually do, and I appreciate that, but others don't, because when you can't keep the kids there the full time, when they're not attending, you can't bill for other services and such. So they are still dropping kids, and so we got hit with that, and I think we asked for extra additional funds here to make up for that because the rates were going up so much. But they are still continuing not only to charge us full attendance, they are still raising the rates, the daily rates, for how much it costs to send a child. And you'll see the tuition rates per day, what they cost. Anywhere from the lowest being $289 up to close to over $410 is the most expensive. So that's per day. That does not include the transportation costs or any extra evaluations or related services that we need for the kid per their request. Because if they don't have anybody to do those services, it falls on the local SAU, which happens a lot. And we also need to pay the seed cost portion, which is 38% back to the state. So they're collecting 100% of the seed. We're responsible for the 38% to the state. So it ends up being additional. This year, we're up to paying $3.1 million for seed itself. In your packet, there should be breakdown by school, how much it's costing us for seed, just the 38%. So it can be deceiving because when you look at the daily tuition rates, it doesn't include the transportation or the seed cost. And some of these schools are going like over 200 days per year at that rate per kid.
Do the rates vary because the different programs are providing different services, or what is the rate fluctuates quite a bit from one program to the
Mhm.
next? Is that because some schools are providing more, or?
Yeah, I think too, they look at like how much one school is billing for services through main care. Like if they're billing quite a bit for every related service, then the tuition rates, that's where I've seen they've gone down a little bit by the state. But yes, like Morrison Center is for very intense students. And so I could see how that would be higher than some of the other ones. Last year, one of the Spurwink took over the Renaissance School in the summertime after the budget passed, and that was a $100 increase and they go more days per year. So that was we had 8 kids there. So that was a lot of money that we hadn't budgeted that we then had to pick up the cost. Yes.
So I have a question, and this is kind of like hypothetical, but we have a building, 287 Main, right? And if we opened our own special purpose private school, we would be able to set a tuition. Would we have to pay, if our own kids go there, would we have to pay our portion of the seed for that building? Like technically, if we opened our own special Lewiston Public Schools special
Mhm.
permit, whatever.
So yes, we pay for ours, but we don't pay for anyone we tuition in. So this is just an example. The 2 students that I've tuitioned in, they accept responsibility for the IEP, just like we do for our outplacement kids. So their special education coordinator or person is the one running the meetings, writing the IEPs. All of the billing, the student remains in their power school system, and then they'll get the bill for the 38% to pay to the state. So we get to collect the 100%.
To your point, though, I think once we have the space thing resolved and we continue to grow these programs, we're already pushing it now. Next year, we'll be talking about just how much is being pushed and what the constraints are on continuing to grow. We talked about this last year. We had like a 3-year type proposal where this will save us money in deflected costs from new students that we don't ever tuition out, the students we can bring back. But there is a cost for staff, there's a cost for space. But the savings to do this here is great as it relates to reimbursement, as it relates to kids having a better experience. We have to staff it, we have to have the space, but that, like, for example, the slide Kirsten showed earlier with the $1.3 million already in reimbursements, that's just billable. Those are things that we're providing that in the alternative, if an outplace location was billing that, we'd be responsible for at least 38% of that 1.3 million for our own kids to be elsewhere instead of receiving it as reimbursement.
Yeah, I think too, something to say in relation to that is, so then we get to collect 62% rather than not collecting anything at all. So when they're outplaced, we pay the 38%, but don't get anything. And not that it's about making money, but it's a lot. Like if you think about it per kid, we do have to pay EDMS, which is the one that bills for us 11%. So there's 62% that we receive from main care, which is federal and state, but we then have to pay 11%. So it only ends up being like a little over 50, but it's better than nothing, I guess.
So I do recollect the last year that we had a PowerPoint presentation. Are we on year 1 or are we on year 2?
So this is year 1, and I
Okay.
actually brought that old slide in. So at the end, I'll touch on what we shared
Okay.
last year and take a look at it with the numbers that
Okay.
Dr. Crafts has shared.
So next year, next September, we'll be entering year 2. So we need to know where we are with our goals with that, right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I think I'm good here. Yep. Reduction, so I mentioned this earlier, I eliminated 28 positions. There is a link that will show you which positions and where. I talked about last year reducing the day treatment level of services and self-contained and trying to rebuild those in the future because it was harder to keep kids that were having significant challenges behaving in the public school setting. So a lot of those positions are unfilled clinician positions or day treatment self-contained positions. Eliminated those to help balance the budget since Climb was not necessarily approved for the budget last year. So that helped out. I also eliminated $100,000 from our iReady PD coaching days. We were fortunate enough to get that. I don't have any instructional coaches in the district for just special ed. So we have an iReady program that we use for our testing, and it has instructional lessons components in it. It's great, but unless you know how to use it, it doesn't really work. So we've been fortunate enough for the last year and a half to have a dedicated person that goes to each building in the district one day a month to support the teachers in getting that going. I feel like we're at a pretty decent place that's up and running, that we could eliminate that in order to help balance the budget. Question?
Yeah, so our link doesn't, well, it does work. When I click on the link, it comes up and says I need access.
Okay, I'll go
So
through.
I just wanted to point that out.
Yep, it should be in here too, but I'll go through and make sure that whoever is the owner of it shares it with you. To anybody with a Lewiston Public School email. Yes,
So these are 28 unfilled positions.
yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Also eliminated $20,000 out of our ESY budget. So Michelle has come up with a new model to service ESY that we can cut down on how many staff need to be hired and all that. We're just trying to reduce things to do things more efficiently. So did that as well. Okay, planning for the future. So we're going to continue to work on bringing back kids from special purpose private schools. We have gone out, Katie has gone to a lot of the places, Katie Colasante from Climb, to look at the students to see who would be appropriate to come back for Climb, but noticed in that time that there are a lot of kids in outplacements that needs are less than some of our Rise in FLS kids in-house. So that is a good thing because we can bring them back, and I feel like we need to do right by that and put them in their least restrictive environment, but we also need to make sure that we have the space and the staff and all of that. It's a big puzzle piece, and I'll go over some of that in another slide later on. But I did put a side note here that we budgeted less for our tuition and seed costs this year because we plan on bringing kids back next year. So that $1.8 million, we're going to have projections that we're taking kids back in order to meet that reduction. So that's another way that I helped lower the budget to make it better now. But we're just going to have to be mindful of that and make sure that we, bring kids back. Yes.
So it sounds like some of the kids that are outplaced maybe don't necessarily need to be outplaced. If a parent wants their child to stay in the special purpose private school, is that an option that parents have to keep their kids there, even though it costs so much more than mainstreaming them or bringing them back home? Do they have say in that process, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Well, I think that this is a tough question. And I've asked the DOE, I had a meeting with them last week. Katie and I met with a couple of them because we have to follow special education law in the least restrictive environment. So if that is not their least restrictive environment, they have the right to be in public school. And I understand that it's hard. I'm a mom and I would be scared if my kid was getting, in something that they've always been in. And so I understand, it's like we're trying to navigate that. But we also need to follow the law, and they do need to have opportunities to be in their least, to have access to their community and their peers. And so we're currently working through that. So the answer would be no. I mean, yes, you can give input, but we have to also follow the law, but we're trying to do right by all of the stakeholders, I guess you could say. It's a work in progress.
I just want to add too, because there's other components to this where a special purpose private school may want to keep a kid because they have built a good relationship and they're very manageable and they maximize their billing. And it could be a good fit for the kid, but if the good fit is also here and is 50% less per child, then we need to work to have that happen here. I do think the team's been good about transition planning and trying to get ahead of conversations. But we also discovered some things where the special purpose private school has called meetings of their own and not invited us to try to assure the families that there will be no change, and it creates a harder transition conversation. So the team does a good job working through it, but there are certainly folks who don't care what it costs, want their kids to stay where they're at because it's working for them. And so we have that, I'll call it a delicate line that we try to navigate with families to make sure that kids are getting a good service. And I think Climb is a great example of that. Parents are saying their kids are having a fantastic experience. And I will guarantee you that every one of them was scared about this transition and what it might look like. But now that it's developed and happening, people can visit, they can see it, they can know the transition went well. But there's still challenges. But I think you ask a fair question because there are some parents who don't want their kids to transition because it's working. And so we have to make sure we're doing a good job to make it work and have them transition appropriately.
Given that there are some constraints on our end in terms of staff and space, I mean, are you able to, is it enough students potentially in that situation that you're able to prioritize those families that are fine with it? And or students that are kind of at a natural transition point in terms of
Yeah.
grade and age anyways?
That's what we've been trying to do currently with Climb. So that's why we were doing K to 3, because it was easier to take a child that, hadn't been at an outplacement for their entire, elementary. So we're trying to work in that sense. Do you mind going to the next slide? I think it might be the projection, but I'm not sure. Yeah. So looking at, and this, I don't want anyone to get scared here because I know some of the principals are probably like, oh my God. But 83 spots are open currently right now in district. Not saying it's appropriate that all 83 spots are filled, because you have to have a certain level of staff and quality staff in order to be able to do that. So I wouldn't do that because it wouldn't be in the best interest. But we know, like Michelle and I we know where we can add kids and where we shouldn't add kids right now based on the level of staff and the training. But this is just like the big picture. And this is, I don't know, my 4th or 5th year in this position. And this is what we need to do. We need to invest in, whether it's paying FLS RISE staff more or whatever it may be, so that we can bring the kids back, because that's a huge amount of savings. And honestly, as a special education director for this district, my biggest heartburn every single day is fighting special purpose private schools. And it's just like, it's a lot. And our kids do deserve being here. And I understand why families feel scared, because that's all they know. But this is just a few examples. It's just, when they're at a special purpose private school, they get like the Cadillac of services. They have unlimited resources. They have multiple BHPs working with kids because they have the resources to do that. We don't, but our kids are becoming independent. So we've had kids that come in with a 2-to-1 on an IEP or transition to Climb, and now they're ready. They're not even needing a 1-to-1 and can go to a RISE placement. So if you think about the big picture and what's in the best interest of the kids, you would want your child to not have to rely on 2 adults every single day to get through their day. So that's why I think that we should look at this a little bit harder and start making goals to how can we bring these students back. But we also are going to need space and train staff. So it's taken a while to understand the big picture, but I think that that's where we should look. Yes.
Just because this is clarification, we could currently do this, or we need to hire and find space in order to do this?
They are full right now with staff, these numbers. But like I said, I don't think there are spots where it wouldn't work, that we need to train staff more. There's a few things, a lot of the programs need BCBAs, trained BCBAs, behavioral analysts, in order for them to work appropriately. So maybe we look at paying them a little bit more. So we have more qualified BCBAs to run the programs so that we can fill them more and staff are happier or, but some of them, yes, we can fill, but not all of them. No.
But these are spots that currently exist. But I want to echo the importance of staffing. And I think all of our teams are doing a phenomenal job with what they have. But some of our staff are better than others. I'll call it what it is.
Yep.
And we want to get more staff that are highly qualified and make sure they have good training so they can support each other in those spaces.
Yeah. So it would be like a while out, and I don't want to scare people by saying that. I'm just saying that that is what we should look at putting our resources into.
Just to maybe triply emphasize that point, you're saying that it's potentially that many spots and that much deferred cost for utilizing staff positions and space that we already pay for in the budget.
Mhm.
So even if we did have to pay a little more, add a little training, we're talking maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Mhm.
We're not talking about spending $7 million additional to defer 8.3. We're saying, that's pretty serious amount of money. I mean,
And that doesn't count transportation or if we bill
Right.
for main care for these kids.
so I mean, that would be the equivalent to the entire budget increase this year for
Mhm.
the district.
Space though,
Thank
we
you.
do need space. I mean, some of the classrooms are pretty tight, but even if we had an additional space or put renovations in somewhere, there is definitely could do it.
So I'm very hesitant to put this out into the universe, but we in our district right now use instructional coaches to help our teachers who are not potentially at a position where they should be to teach. You don't have any special ed coaches, right?
Mm-mm.
Like, is that a thing?
Very well could be, and many districts have them, but we do not.
So I guess I'm asking you, like, do you or are there people in our district who could be or would be or qualified to be in a certain position, but with some help could be in a position to fill some of those spots?
Yeah, actually, we had a suggestion the other day for one, like, a potential, like if we had somebody to be like a RISE coach, to go in and train up other buildings, like that, yes, that could help. Because it's hard because I wholeheartedly believe in instructional coaches just because of my experience at the high school. And as the assistant principal that took care of curriculum, I didn't have anybody to necessarily help me with that. And my coaches and I were a team. So I had very positive experiences there. What I've learned in this position is that they're not trained in special ed, and special ed is so different than regular ed. It's not the same. And and I understand why they're hesitant because they're like, oh, special ed law, and don't understand both sides. So yes, I would love that, but I know that constraints are.
Okay, so let's say in a perfect world that, LPS approves you to have a special ed coach, like, do you have someone or like, would there be someone in the district that would be able to step in? I just don't want to say like, let's create this position, then for it to sit open for however long it sits open with nobody able to fill it. Like, is it realistic to be able to fill something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's the right people in the right places. So if they're happy and it's something that they're, you know what I mean, they feel supported by whoever's running that. Yeah, I mean, I can't guarantee it, but I think that it's about the approach and how much support you give them and what you make of the position. So, yes.
So what are the credentials that are needed for coaches or instructors in the RISE program and the behavior specialists? What do they need and what's the criteria?
Well, so for the coaches, well, I don't know for what you experience, what you make the instructional coaches have for a certification, but
So for an instructional coach in a math or literacy or multilingual, they would have a teaching certificate. They would have additional training, may have a master's degree, may have additional training, whether it's within the district or out of the district, in the area of that specialty area or instruction in general. And then with technology, we have technology coaches. They have a different certification, but they're on a teacher's contract with needing a teacher's certificate. And then there's support that we provide them at the district level around our curriculum, additional training, as well as how to be a coach, because you can't just say you're a coach and they are effective. They have to know how to go in and do that. Did you like that? It was. It was. I didn't know how to do it other than use my hands. So they would have some additional training to be able to do that. So in this situation, I would say they would need to have a special ed teacher certification, and they would need to have some additional training in, how to provide SDI, how to provide, coaching around an IEP goals and those types of things. Yeah, I think
it would depend too, like, because if you were doing like a resource room coach or something, like a co-teaching coach, they would want to do basic SDI within the mainstream setting or a resource room setting. If you're looking at RISE, which is our programmatic stuff, I would probably have them consult with Mark Palmieri, who is our CCSN consultant that comes in every other month. Anyways, he could train them. He works closely with the BCBAs and keeps the programs running. And Katie also knows what the BCBAs need. So because she is a BCBA, their certification's different.
So to become a credentialed behavior analyst, you need to have a master's degree in applied behavior analysis or a master's degree in another related field. That could be special education, it could be psychology, with an additional graduate certificate in applied behavior analysis. You then have to accrue supervision hours under an already credentialed behavior analyst and then pass a comprehensive national board exam.
Well, I'm kind of blown away by that. For some reason in my head, I thought maybe they would be on the same level as a PCA or CRMA or that kind of level. But you're saying these people need like master's degrees in order to even to fill these positions.
For a board certified behavior analyst role, yes, that would be, I think you mentioned like a behavior specialist. That's
Right.
To have a BCBA, those are the credentials they would need.
Okay.
Yeah, they're currently responsible for running our RISE programs and some of our FLS programs. And the programming.
Sorry. Just to add to, so some of the spots you see up there are teachers, so they would need a 282 or a teaching certification in special education. But we also have ed techs, and there's different levels of ed tech. You can get an ed tech 1 credential with 30 college credits, 2 at 60, and ed tech 3 at 90 plus credits. BHPs have specific training around behavior management. So that's a different set of training that they have to have. But those are all the credentials of those roles.
I was just going to say, like, basically the same thing, like a BHP, a behavioral health professional, is different from a BCBA. Like, I think maybe that's where you're confusing the two. There's a difference in education between the two positions.
And from a model perspective, and correct me if I misspeak, you'll have like one BCBA for a school that is full of programs that would work with all the programs, or maybe some overlap, but they wouldn't be in every class every day per se. This is someone who's really specifically trained at identifying what's going on and what strategies might help start from where they are to grow them to a certain place. So it's I call it Katie level stuff.
BHPs are primarily ed tech roles, but they go through more training. They have regular meetings. They go through additional trainings, like, I'm probably not thinking because it's been a long day, but like, CPR and all the TCI, yes. Like just, they're trained up. They're great. I mean, our programs wouldn't work without them, but they're ed techs, but they're trained a lot more in order to meet the complex needs of the kids. So this is just an overview of main care billing. I pulled it last year and from last year's slide when we presented the night before the final budget vote. But just the difference between the 65 and the 28. I know we've talked a lot about main care revenue. 65 would be day treatment level services. Currently, our day treatment programs have been reduced because post-COVID it was hard. Kids were just struggling within the system and we felt like they deserved better. And we're currently working through TCI, getting it through all of the schools and trying to really pump up our programs so that they're healthier, I guess you could say. Section 28 is FLS Rise and Climb. There's a difference between climb level of students. Those are students that are receiving one-to-one and our specialized section 28 and our FLS Rise students are just section 28. So that's primarily our autism spectrum disorder and intellectually disabilities. So we're looking to expand Rise classrooms if space allows us to, because it's a less restrictive environment. You do not need to have a one-to-one. It promotes more independent living. But if we do need one-to-ones and kids need to be more supported, we have Climb. So it's just different levels of services. So we can offer our kids more because we have a lot of need.
Just programmatically, we're trying to be logical about what we provide. We have lots and lots of kids that we believe we can manage and hire staff and train for, that we pay to go elsewhere. Those are the kids that we're focusing our efforts and resources on. And the kids that are really, really hard to manage, Kirsten's done a good job with her team of trying to find an outplacement for those students so that we can continue to grow in areas where we can manage students more effectively and still save incredible amounts of money.
I think too, I want to point out, because I know that families are nervous about, because we still need outplacements. There are kids that will, that's just what they need. That is their least restrictive environment. And like, we look at every child individually and what is in their best interest. And, I understand, like, it's hard, so I don't want parents to feel like, oh, we're just going to take your kid out, when they need that level of service, because that would never happen. We have to have the data to back it up. And we do when we do it. We make sure there's multiple visits and looking at the IEPs and looking at the data is there to support a transition back. And it might be only coming back for half the day or whatever makes the most sense. And then I think this is my last slide. This is just the overall projections for main care revenue. Recently realized that we were not bringing in as much money as I thought. So we did an audit and realized that we were not billing for what the state said that we could bill, the maximum amount. So we readjusted the figures and we're going back and figuring that all out. So basically the top is just our FLS Rise kids for next year. If we bill in the programs, we should receive about 841,000 at the current numbers we have now. That's not adding any additional kids. And I didn't factor in if we take 10 kids back or anything like that, just the numbers as of today. And then for Climb, figured out that we could make $1.3 million for main care revenue back. And then we've also started billing for transportation because that's something else that we figured out along the way. And you just see the difference between the related service providers and day treatment, about $410,000 additional dollars coming in for that. And then at the bottom is just the tuition from the 2 kids that we've taken. Like I said, we get the 100% back for them. The other students is 50 something percent. So I just wanted you to have those numbers. But I also want to say, I always hear it's about the money and you want to make money, and it's not that. It's just doing things smarter to in the best interest of the kids, obviously, because that's their least restrictive environment. But we also need to be mindful of the taxpayers. And we have a lot of needs and trying to budget out the whole system and looking at the bigger picture. So that's all I have. Yes.
Sorry, just one more question. You said you figured out you can bill for transportation now.
Mhm.
Is there a way to back bill for the transportation that we haven't billed
For the year.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm all done. All
Thank
right.
you. Yes, you're done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, person and team, for all of your very hard work. It's critically important. Great job. So no real surprises here. Kirsten covered about everything. Just want to follow that same format just for consistency purposes. And I'd mentioned that we talked about the phased approach. So this is the slide from last year, and I thought about tampering with it and doing another layer of projection. But I think when we look at year one, just to talk about where we were at, I wrote down the number. Our target for this year was to have 240 students that were in-house or in our home schools, and we're at 226. We talked about investing about $3 million. We're actually under the 3 million in investment. And the returns are actually higher than we anticipated. And with the new billing piece, that revenue is continuing to grow. It'll reach a threshold that it is what it is, and very predictable, but we've learned a lot, as mentioned. So in year two, 2/3, and this is why when someone asks, is that year two or year three, we had done like a multi-year piece. And part of this is, if we look at the middle area and the circle is on more of a full wing of a school, we talked about growing by 60 students to get to 300 over a next 2-year cycle. The reality is, with better, more and trained staff, we can grow that number with existing space. But we are sensitive to not just grow the number because of enrollments. We need to make sure that the kids are going to get the right support, and that our staff have the right support amongst each other and as a building, to do that. So we believe over the next 2 years, we can grow to that 60 more students with what we have for space and folks in it, to an extent. I think the challenge that we have, and you're seeing it right now when we talk about adding that one more bathroom space, that's not undoable, right? And the revenues are there, so we can use funds connected to that to do this work. But there's no more wing, there's no more, right? There's no more other pieces. We have looked into the modular that's right outside the building over here, and shifting that from a home-based project to potentially space at McMahon or other schools that have modulars to do something where we grow on a specific site. We're not there just yet, but we're still looking at that. But we're looking at, again, looking at commitments to total cost and adding to it for what does it cost us to do this work, while being mindful of the revenue created by doing it. And so we are going to have more conversations about things like, when we hired folks for the climb program, we wanted to be ahead of that curve, and so that it could be successful. So what we said on purpose up front, and the team has done this, we're going to hire the best people we can. We have April and Katie, and they do a fantastic job. But they're constantly hiring, looking to stay ahead of our kid ratios. Those positions are paid more, somewhat substantially more than some of our other staff, but it is a year-round gig. It has other challenges to it, so it qualifies that way. It's hard work, and people are doing a great job. But we've invested in that financially to create the capacity. So instead of saying, I'm not sure this program will work because we're understaffed, because we're underpaying, and because of all of the other challenges, we've gotten ahead of it. And now we're talking about an expansion, servicing kids that, as Member Hurd shared, seeing the kids in the wagons is just, it's a joyful thing. Kids should see their peers that live in their same neighborhood that might have challenges that are different than theirs. And it's good stuff. So I do think over the next 2 years, we continue to grow just as we projected around those lines, but we are going to run into a wall, or already have, around space. And I know 287 Main Street is something that we talk about a lot, or at least maybe not enough yet, but we need to just start developing concepts around that. We do have some LCIP requests in for this year and future as a possibility, at least from a conversation perspective. We'll talk more about that on Monday. But I guess what I wanted to show in this slide is where I would say we, but really this team is working their tails off to hit those targets. And the constraints that they have right now are beyond their control, and they are around space. So we need to continue to work on that, and we have. I'm excited to share a little bit that some things are happening at 287 from a get rid of things. We're working with the hospital for some different medical things that needed to go, and also just some other things in the space to get it cleaned up. And the first couple of floors look really good right now, and I'm excited as we get the next 2 floors done to maybe host something there or start a meeting there or something like that. We can invite the public to come and just see the space and think of the possibilities as we're having these kinds of conversations in the budget. It's pretty exciting. And then ultimately, again, year 4 or 5, as we look forward, do we get to a place where the revenue is enough to contribute to the renovation of the building? Do we get to a place where the revenue is enough to lease a space, outfit a space, what have you? But if we get big enough in that sense, some of these things may pay for themselves. So we're trying to be really smart about our process here. But the wing at McMahon is not going to be enough commitment. We know that we need commitment in other areas. I'd love to fill those 83 spots, but to do so, we need to have more discussion about compensation, I think, and how we might diversify those offerings for people differently than the peer across the hall that might not be working in the special program.
Just a question, and I don't, my memory is not so good about this. I think we knew that McMahon, that we would be using that wing, and we knew that we were going to have to grow in the year 2 and 3. What did we talk about as far as space at that time last year? What were we going to do with year 2 and 3? Because we knew we were going to outgrow that space rather quickly in McMahon.
Yeah, I think we still hope and wish for money to show up. We apply for every grant we can think of, every funding opportunity. Still hoping that one or some of them will come to fruition. We'll do what we can with local budget, but I think the year 2, 3 piece is about prepping a space for years 4, 5, but also having high quality staff that are well trained to fill the classrooms we currently have, and then we'll be compelled to add at that point if enrollments don't push us even quicker than that. Because there's still concerns as I see it around enrollments. We are still seeing an uptick in new enrollments. Yeah, good.
Well, last year I had felt like we would go pre-K, well, if we would have had taken on CDS, which we're not, but I was thinking about going to 22. But the enrollments coming in, especially at the high school level, there's not a lot of space. And looking at the big picture, a student that's been at Margaret Murphy or another placement their entire, not having the right amount of space, it just doesn't seem fair to them. So I really, talking with the team from Climb, thought it makes more sense to just grow from the K-6 model up so that we don't have to get into battles. But obviously, if a student is ready to come back and it's their least restrictive environment and the data's there, then we'll look at bringing them back where appropriate, where we have openings in the district. So that's my thinking on it anyways.
So I would like to ask, where we're obviously talking budget talk, and the thing I keep hearing over and over is high quality trained staff, high quality trained staff, high quality trained staff. Would it be possible for you and Kirsten or you and Karen, whoever, to get us what a special ed coach position would look like and what that would cost? Because that 8.3 is a very large number.
If I could be bold, because of the nature of the specialized programming and how intense they are, and the acute needs that are very different from program to program, while there's some overlap between some, it can be very specific. I'd go on a limb and say we need 5 coaches or 4 coaches to start, because you need someone for RISE, and they are going to be all around the district. You need someone for day treatment. You need someone for Climb. So all these different programs would benefit from dedicated people. If we hired one, I don't think it'd be bad. I think that person would do good work, but that you're talking multiple classrooms in every single school that would require their support.
So I'm wondering if we maybe, again, and this is like a Kirsten conversation, but like, is there one programming where you think you could start and see if like a Rise coach and kind of on like a trial basis type thing? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying for you to have 5, but can we pick like one programming that you think we could, that would be the most beneficial, I guess is what I'm saying.
I'll bet you she could come up with that. And just as a side, our coaches are teacher salary. We may want to explore year round, so it might be a little more expensive, but I would want Kirsten and her team to chime in on that. But a teacher right now, if we were budgeting new, we would be looking at about 75,000. That would be the number we would insert into the budget, and then there'd be healthcare and things like that. So
But would they need a different level set of training?
we do a fair amount of that training in-house. So there may be some PD costs, things like that, but I think we could absorb if we had to, if we had the ability to add that person. I think it would create revenue because the qualified people would have the support. They would potentially stay longer, and we could put more kids in those spaces, which would create revenue every kid.
Sorry. Because it's a new position and we just talked about this, does it fall under Title I?
No, it would not. If we added this, it would be local.
So following up on that line of thought a little bit, so in terms of, whether it should be 1 or 5, I mean, I think 1 maybe seems a little more manageable if anything, but also just understanding what that would be accomplishing if the purpose of that would be to upskill the existing staff so that they're more able to take on more students. Presumably that's not distributed evenly across all the programs. So presumably there would be one program, I'm imagining, unless it just happened to work out where the staff level and quality and training is evenly distributed everywhere. But there might be one that could be a little more well targeted if that was what was available.
Well, is it okay? I feel like there's different pockets in the district. So like, for instance, Geiger has been up and running for a long time with Rise. They're doing well, but they don't have a BCBA right now. That is a pivotal position that they need. So if we could pay the BCBA roles a little bit more so we can get trained BCBAs that stay, because that'll help our programs function. Connors Elementary School has been through a lot of transition, and they could really use a coach, whether it is that we bring Rise programming back or whatnot. But like, there's more space here. I don't want to speak for you, Debbie, but I feel like there could be space, but we need the programs to run and be functional. So they would definitely thrive with like a coach that could come in and get it going. Whereas Geiger's already there, but they need a BCBA. So we could pay a BCBA more or whatever it may be, but every building is different.
Yeah, and that was going to be my second point, which is maybe the coach could be part of the conversation, but I think just more broadly, if you see a package of things that would help unlock that number that we saw on there, I mean, that makes obviously our jobs easier when it's very clearly like, here's an amount of money that we could be saving and we're not, and here's an amount of money that we could invest to unlock that amount. I understand also what you're saying about not trying to make it all about the dollars, but in this specific case in budget season, I mean, that's an easy thing, I think, for us to consider.
And to the amount of staff turnover in certain areas, we're starting over constantly. So you're putting more money into it. Whereas if we just did it good from the start,
right. So
a lot further.
That's just to put a point on it. I mean, I think the coach idea came up, which I think maybe that does make the most sense, but just what would you suggest in full, kind of range of options, what might help?
Are you asking now or
No,
later?
not
I
second.
I just say,
Yeah.
let me just, I think we could, in a pretty quick turnaround, not for Monday, because that's the joint meeting, but I think either by next Wednesday or shortly thereafter, we could bring something back to you that would be the team's input on how to maximize quality of staff, retention, and maximizing students' return programs that are healthy and running well. That's a conservative approach.
And that would include like, 'cause so adding one coach isn't going to bring that 8.5 million or whatever it was all back. Paying paying the ABA position at Geiger a little bit more to get a qualified person, like, it's gotta be more than just those two things to reach that full 8 million that was proposed. So will this package include everything that's needed? Or like, if we add this, this is what we could save, or, you know what I mean? Like, how's it gonna be broken down, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think I'm still very mindful of being extremely conservative in this budget cycle. So I'd say I'll give Kirsten a chance to talk to her team and see what they think might fit. And then I'll run it through the Jake conservative filter before I bring it back. But I think we can probably strike a balance between, if we spent this, we think we might be able to draw that. And it might be a good step. I'm also mindful of capacity as it relates to, we're not gonna be able to go from, years 2, 3 and year 4, 5 and use another space or building or floor without being ramped up, in a sense, from a staff perspective. We don't want to build up to it, fall short with the supports, and then have it fail. So we can come up with something and bring it back. Yeah.
One more thing. I was really excited about this last year, and I'm even more excited about it this year. For the possibility of these kids coming back to their hometown and saving so many millions of dollars. I mean, that's important. And, it's just like anything else that we do. We have to invest something in order to get the return. And, and I just want to say that to our community is that, this is exciting. This is, as much as we spend for people out placements, we're going to get so much more. We're going to have, we have teachers and staff that are qualified, highly qualified, and get our kids back here where they belong. Thank you.
All right, so very similar to what we shared for other areas, other articles, excuse me. You can see some changes here, and there's definitely some talking points behind some of these pieces. And just note that increases that you're seeing are large in part the effort, excuse me, around climb, and those ads. Excuse me. You can see the $30 difference in out of district placement. So it's still working in the right direction. Some of that is just based on cost for things going out, things coming in. I want to make sure people are fully aware that as we project this budget and we say, we're coming in at that, the proposed 3.44%, unless we add something, built into that is the revenue of these programs that are projected. So that I just want to make sure the public's aware that that money doesn't just fly in here and get hidden or go somewhere else. We use it to pay other bills, and that's how we're balancing the budget. So the funds that have been saved or brought in by reimbursements or whatnot, it's offsetting other expenditures, including the cost to implement climb. So you can see the overall in these other slides, as we showed prior, you can see the percent increase from FY25 to now is that 234 as that percent. It's that big number. Again, just around the efforts that you knew we were going to do. And there's some teacher stipend increases too. The actual dollar increase, when you see that 2.029, that's large in part the cost of staff and efforts around climb. While noting that we're projecting, upwards of $3 or $4 million in less expenditures to send these students elsewhere. And I always like to use the word deflecting costs in these efforts, because I think this year's example is a good one. 17 students that slid right into that program that was new, that we would be outplacing. So when we talk about our tuition assessments, it's 17 times 150,000 before services and transportation. So that's money that's not going out. So it's critically important to the work we're doing. The percent increase of the overall budget. So you can see this effort, which has been very driven by some goals and the support of the committee, is a 1.73% impact on our overall budget, and it's creating millions of savings. So we want to continue to be mindful about that growth. Yeah, sure.
Clarifying question. So what exactly is in the other staff category and the non-salary category? So it's not teachers or ed techs, I take it. Bill's
One second.
leaping into
I
action.
I have all my written out notes, but they're below
Sure,
that slide.
So it does include the ed techs in the climb program. So that's why you're seeing that big cost in there. And it traditionally, when you see those in articles, other staff would be like clerical positions. If there's a position like our Medicare billing position that we had and things, but this article is kind of a little bit of an anomaly where those positions are all in that other staff.
Okay, thank you. And the non-salary category we saw was dropping.
Non-salary was like supplies, equipment, things like that.
Yeah, technology, books, periodicals.
All right, thank you.
There's also, we have in the notes just reduction to health services to social work, psychological and speech. And some of that were costs that we were incurring for students who were outplaced that the outplacement couldn't provide, that we also had to pay for and then pay the reimbursement for.
Also with local entitlement, we, in that other non-salary, we had kind of gotten hurt because in local entitlement, we had put salaries in there, and then the way that they counted it counted against us. So we moved some of those kind of contracted services back to local entitlement, which brought that down in our local budget.
And as a plug to the rest of the country, local entitlement is specifically federal funding. And if certain areas of funding are reduced by Congress or otherwise, it could impact local entitlement if it's connected to IDEA. That was all I had for slides for tonight.
Any other questions? Any other questions or comments from the committee? Are there any members of the public that wanted to speak on any of this? We can adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by member Bowden,
Second.
seconded by member Hurd. All in favor? School committee is adjourned.